Please, it's so cold.
No.
He looks just like me.
New York roars with snow. Adrian Cole, a lonely titan of real estate, grips his late father's frost-cracked silver compass. He looks up. On the scaffolding, a shivering boy peers through the glass, the same blue eyes, the same stubborn chin. A son? Or winter's trick? The window rattles, regret bites. If Adrian opens that latch, will he save a child, or face the life he ran from? New York was a white roar, the kind that made even taxis lower their voices. Adrian Cole stepped from the back seat of his black sedan and into a wall of snow that stung his face and clung to his suit like fine salt. The driver lifted an umbrella, but the wind tilted it uselessly. For a second, Adrian simply stood there, tall and steady, letting the cold bite through the navy wool and crisp white shirt, the red tie snapping like a flag. "Sir, lobby's ready," the driver said, leaning his shoulder into the gale. "I'll walk it," Adrian answered, voice level, eyes on the glass tower that wore his name in steel letters. "It's only 30 steps." He moved through the spin of snow, a man carved for speed and daylight, yet moving slowly, as if each footfall measured something he no longer trusted. In his pocket, the frost-cracked silver compass pressed against his palm. He had carried it since the funeral, since the day they folded a flag and called his father a good man. The face of the compass was spidered with a crack across north, a thin white vein like winter's handwriting. His father used to say, "Find north when you're lost, and when you can't, stay put until the storm passes." The revolving door hissed. Warmth washed up from marble floors and gold light. A security guard nodded. A concierge lifted a hand in greeting. The lobby smelled faintly of cedar and coffee. Adrian's reflection slid across the glass like a stranger in the same suit. "Evening, Mr. Cole," the concierge said. "Board call in 15. Market's already jittery about the Hong Kong news." "Let them jitter," Adrian said, wiping snow from his hair with a towel someone offered. "If the deal is sound, it stands in wind." He meant it, and yet something in him felt like wind too, moving, powerful, empty. He buttoned his jacket and rubbed the compass with his thumb until the metal warmed, then stepped toward the private elevator. A message blinked on his phone. A reporter asking for comment on layoffs. An investor nudging about returns. A lawyer confirming the court date on an old case he'd pushed from spring to winter, and from winter to nowhere. The elevator doors closed. Mirrors caught him from every angle. Deep blue eyes, dark hair threaded with gray, jawline set the way it always set before a fight. He looked like a man who could carry a city. He felt like a man carrying silence. At the 35th floor, a woman in a charcoal dress fell into step beside him. Jenna Morse, chief of staff, sharp and patient. "Forecast says the river might freeze by morning," she said. "We should cancel tomorrow's site tour." "Safety first," he said. "Reschedule for next week." She glanced at the compass he still cupped in his hand. "Your father's?" He nodded. "He climbed half the Adirondacks with this thing. I used to pretend the tiny scratch by West was a wolf trail." "You were a boy who pictured wolves," she said, smiling. "That tracks." He didn't smile back. "Wolves don't scare me. Getting lost does." Her voice softened. "Do you want me to move your dinner with Senator Reeve?" "Move it," Adrian said, "and make sure the cafeteria keeps the warming station open late. Anyone stuck inside gets soup and bread. No charge." "You got it." They parted. He crossed the empty corridor toward his corner office, the glass stretching from floor to ceiling, the city a storming canvas beyond it. On his desk, a stack of contracts waited, neat and ambitious. He set the compass beside them, the cracked face catching a thread of light. Somewhere in the building, a metal sound clattered, sharp, distant, then swallowed by wind. He paused, head turned, listening. His phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number blinked twice, then disappeared. Spam or a pocket send. He let it go. The metal clatter returned, a rattle skittering along the facade like a coin on stone. He walked closer to the window. Snow migrated sideways in sheets, sometimes vanishing, sometimes showing him the ghost shapes of the city, bridges, chimneys, scaffolding he barely remembered approving last month. He leaned his knuckles on the glass. His breath fogged the pane and cleared. The compass ticked softly, or maybe it was his pulse, steadying against the crack at north. "Sir?" Jenna's voice carried from the doorway. "The board is on." He didn't turn. 1 minute. From the corner of his eye he saw movement. Small, quick, where movement shouldn't be. A shadow along the scaffolding frame. Then nothing. Only wind. Only snow. Only the sound of a metal hook kissing a rail. Adrian's palm found the compass again, fingers closing around the cold, familiar circle. He breathed once, deeply, and let the silence answer him. The city roared back, relentless. He stayed at the glass a heartbeat longer, caught between duty and something he couldn't yet name, as if the storm itself were knocking. The blizzard thickened as Adrian Cole crossed the plaza toward his tower. Snow slapped against the glass facade, the city reduced to a blur of gray and white. He adjusted his coat collar, ready to step inside the revolving doors, when movement caught his eye. Up above, against the swirling snow, 3 small figures clung to scaffolding. His building stretched 30 stories into the night sky, and yet, there they were. 3 boys, no older than 9, their arms trembling as they dragged wet rags across the frozen windows. Adrian froze. For a moment, he thought the storm was playing tricks on him, but the cries carried through the wind. "Hold tighter!" one boy shouted, his voice thin against the roar of the storm. Another coughed, nearly dropping his rag, while the smallest tried to balance on the icy beam. Adrian's breath misted in the cold. Children. On his tower, in the middle of a snowstorm. He glanced at the lobby guards through the glass doors. None of them noticed. Their eyes fixed on their phones, warm behind the polished marble desk. How could no one else see this? Adrian turned back. The boys' coats were threadbare, their sneakers split at the seams, their hands bare against the iron rails. The sight carved into him like ice. He had seen desperate men in boardrooms, investors clawing at survival, but never this. Never children clinging to life 200 feet above a frozen street. A horn blared below. A cab braked hard, skidding on black ice. A bystander pointed up, shouting something Adrian couldn't hear. The boys didn't stop. They scrubbed harder, as if cleaning glass could keep them alive. Adrian's pulse quickened. "What, in God's name?" he muttered. He fumbled for his phone, ready to call security, then stopped. His hands stilled, his gaze locked on the smallest boy. In the halo of a flickering street lamp, the child's face turned toward him. Blue eyes, piercing, unmistakable, even through the storm. Adrian stumbled back a step, the snow crunching beneath his polished shoes. His chest tightened, breath shallow as the storm swallowed the sound of his own heartbeat. Those eyes. They weren't just familiar, they were his. Adrian's breath fogged against the glass as he tilted his head upward, straining to see through the whirling snow. The boys clung to the scaffolding, their ragged jackets flapping like torn sails. Then the eldest leaned forward, face lit briefly by the street lamp below. Adrian staggered, hand tightening around the frost-cracked compass in his pocket. The boy's jawline, square, unyielding, was his own. The same tilt of the chin, the same defiant crease between the brows. Not one boy, but all 3. Each of them carried his reflection, as though the storm itself had pulled his childhood from the past and scattered it onto the steel beams of his tower. His throat closed. "No." The word vanished into the wind. The eldest boy noticed him. Their eyes locked across the storm. A moment stretched, fragile as ice. Adrian lifted a hand, pressing his palm flat against the cold pane of glass. "Where are your parents?" he shouted, voice muffled by the window. The boy's lips moved. Adrian yanked the window latch, wrestled against the frozen seal, and pushed it open just enough for the wind to rip through the office. The cold stung his face as the boy's reply sliced across the night. "We don't have any." The words struck harder than the snow. They pierced through layers of armor he had built over decades. Contracts, boardrooms, endless towers of glass. He gripped the window frame, knuckles white. "No parents?" he called back. Disbelief tangled with something deeper, something raw. "Who sent you out here?" The eldest shook his head. "No one sent us. We work, or we freeze." The youngest lost his grip for half a second, scrambling to hold on. Adrian lurched forward, heart thudding. His reflection shivered across the glass beside the boy's small, frightened face. The likeness was undeniable, unbearable. His own eyes stared back at him, threefold. Adrian slammed the window shut, stumbling back into the office, chest heaving. He pressed both hands over his face, but the image clung. 3 boys with his face, cleaning his empire's windows for scraps. The compass burned cold in his palm. He whispered to the empty room, voice ragged. "What have I done?" The storm pressed harder against the glass, rattling the window frames as if demanding he face it. Adrian paced the length of his office, his shoes whispering across the polished floor. But the words would not leave him. "We don't have any." They had burned into him, echoing louder than any boardroom battle he had ever fought. He grabbed his coat, ignoring the blinking light on his phone. The board was still waiting on video conference. Let them wait. He pushed past Jenna in the hallway, her eyes wide with surprise. "Cancel everything," he barked. "No interruptions." "Mr. Cole, the market, I said cancel." His tone silenced her. He rarely raised his voice, but tonight the storm outside had followed him inside. In the back of the sedan, the city blurred by, the snow smearing lights into streaks of silver and gold. Adrian pressed the compass into his palm, as though it could steady him. The scratch across north caught his thumb, the same mark he remembered tracing as a boy. His father had once said, "A man without family is a man without direction." He had dismissed it then as sentiment. Tonight, it gnawed at him. "Drive to Lexington in 42nd, he told the driver suddenly. "Sir?" "Just do it." The car turned sharply, tires crunching through the thickening snow. Adrian's investigator, a quiet man named Harris, was waiting in a cafe across from the shelter on that corner. Adrian had called him on impulse, barely able to shape the words. 3 boys. Find out who they are. Tonight. The cafe was nearly empty. Adrian slid into the booth opposite Harris, his coat still dripping meltwater. "You found them?" Adrian asked, voice sharp. Harris nodded, sliding a thin folder across the table. "They've been working odd jobs. Cleaning windows, hauling trash. No guardian listed. But I traced them back. Their mother was Hannah Pierce." Adrian's chest tightened. The name hit like a blade. Hannah. His first love. The one who had walked away without goodbye, vanishing a decade ago into the folds of the city. The folder lay unopened, but the storm inside him already knew. His fingers tightened on the compass. "They're mine," Adrian whispered. The folder sat between them, its paper edges curling with condensation from Adrian's wet coat. For a long moment, he couldn't bring himself to touch it. Just the sight of Hannah's name scrawled across the front pulled him backward in time, back to late nights in her tiny apartment, the smell of jasmine tea, her laughter carrying over the city hum. Then, the silence that followed when she vanished. No word, no trace, nothing. Adrian finally flipped the folder open. Inside were photographs, grainy from shelter records, of 3 boys. The same blue eyes, the same jawline. His blood written into their features. A sheet of paper slipped loose, a death certificate. Hannah Pierce, 6 months ago. Complications from pneumonia. Age, 38. The words blurred. He steadied the page with trembling fingers. 6 months. While he was closing deals in Hong Kong and debating stock dividends, Hannah was dying. Alone. and the boys, his boys, were left behind. Cause of death is confirmed, Harris said quietly. She worked until the end. Shelters, day jobs, never remarried. No father listed on any forms. But there's more. He slid a sealed envelope across the table. Found in her belongings. Addressed to you. Adrian hesitated, then tore it open. Hannah's handwriting leapt off the page, sharp but fading at the edges. Adrian, if this letter reaches you, it means I'm gone. The boys are yours. They deserve warmth, safety, a name that protects them. Don't let them vanish into the cold. I wanted to tell you, but life didn't give us that chance. Please, if you have any love left for who we were, find them. His vision blurred. He pressed the paper to the table with both hands as if keeping it from flying away. The cafe buzzed around him faintly, cups clinking, steam hissing, but all he could hear was her voice in those lines, a plea from beyond the grave. "Sir," Harris asked carefully, "do you want me to arrange confirmation?" Adrian nodded stiffly. "DNA. As soon as possible." When Harris left, Adrian stayed behind, staring at the compass in his palm. The crack across north caught the dim cafe light, a reminder of promises made and broken. His father's voice whispered in memory, "Family is the only deal you never walk away from." Adrian whispered back, voice hoarse, "I already walked away once." Snow lashed harder against the windows, as though the city itself demanded an answer. The DNA results arrived 2 days later, delivered in a discreet envelope. Adrian sat alone in his penthouse office, the storm outside still raging as though the city hadn't paused for breath since that night. He turned the envelope over in his hands, the seal crisp, the weight heavier than its size. For hours he left it unopened on the desk, afraid of what the truth would demand. When he finally tore it open, the words were blunt, clinical, without ceremony. Paternity confirmed. 3 boys, 99.9%, his sons. Adrian's chest heaved once, then fell silent. He rose, crossing to the wide windows where the city was a blur of lights and storm. He pressed his forehead against the cold glass, whispering, "Sons." The word tasted foreign, heavy but alive. On the desk lay Hannah's letter, creased from where he had read it again and again. Tonight he unfolded it one more time, tracing her script with his thumb. At the bottom, barely legible, was a line he hadn't noticed before. "Tell them I loved them every day. Tell them their father was never truly gone, only lost." A knock startled him. Jenna stepped in, her usual poise softened by concern. "The press is circling about your absence. Should I issue a statement?" "No." Adrian shook his head, voice low. "Not yet." Her gaze fell to the paper in his hand, the compass glinting beside it. She frowned. "What's happening, Adrian?" He exhaled sharply. "I have children. 3 boys. Hannah. She's gone." Jenna's eyes widened, but she said nothing. She simply crossed the room, placed a hand on his arm, and whispered, "Then you know what you have to do." That night, alone again, Adrian sat in the dark with only the compass for company. He ran his thumb across the frost crack, listening to the storm claw at the windows. His father's words haunted him. "A man who abandons family abandons himself." He whispered into the silence, voice breaking. "I swore I'd never do it, and yet I already have." The compass pointed north, steady despite the crack. For the first time in years, Adrian felt it was pointing straight at him, toward the truth he could no longer ignore. The storm eased by morning, but inside Adrian's penthouse the air felt heavier than the night before. He hadn't slept. The DNA report lay open on the table, Hannah's letter folded neatly beside it, and the compass sat between them like a silent judge. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those boys clinging to scaffolding, their blue eyes staring down through the snow. He poured himself a glass of water, hands trembling. The reflection in the glass window stared back at him. Strong jawline, broad shoulders, immaculate suit. Yet, behind the veneer was a man hollowed by guilt. The knock at the door came soft but certain. Jenna entered without waiting. "The board is demanding answers," she said. "They think you're distracted." Adrian gave a humorless laugh. "Distracted? I'm discovering I have 3 sons I never knew about. What's more distracting than that?" She froze. "It's true?" He nodded, pushing the letter across the table. "Hannah. She's gone, Jenna, but she left them. And me." Jenna skimmed the letter, her expression softening. "Adrian, you can't bury this, not with a press release, not with another deal. These are children." He turned away, pressing his palm against the cold glass. "Do you think I don't know? I've spent a lifetime building towers to touch the sky, and all the while my own flesh and blood were cleaning windows in the storm." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Jenna's voice broke the silence, gentle but firm. "So, what now?" Adrian lifted the compass from the table. The crack across north caught the light, a scar that made it imperfect, yet still true. He closed his fist around it. "I'm going to find them," he said. "Not as a CEO, not as some billionaire with a name carved in steel, as a father." He strode toward the door, coat already in hand. Jenna called after him, "Where will you go?" He paused only long enough to look back, eyes fierce with new resolve. "To the shelter. To the boys. This time, I won't hide from the storm." The elevator doors slid shut, and for the first time in years, Adrian Cole wasn't descending into business. He was descending into his own redemption. Snow was piled high against the curbs as Adrian's sedan crept through the city. The storm had slowed traffic to a crawl, horns muffled under blankets of white. Adrian sat forward, the compass tight in his fist, Hannah's letter folded in his coat pocket like a second heartbeat. Every block closer to the shelter felt like crossing a chasm he had built with his own choices. When the car pulled to the corner of Lexington and 42nd, he saw the shelter's faded sign through the frost. St. Matthew's Home for Youth. Its bricks were weathered, its windows glowing with tired light. A place of survival, not comfort. He stepped out into the biting wind, his polished shoes crunching on ice, looking out of place against the line of bundled figures huddled at the entrance. Inside, warmth hit him in a rush. Overcrowded, stale, but alive. Children's laughter mixed with coughs. Volunteers handed out bread and steaming soup. Adrian scanned the room, his height making it easy to see over the crowd. And then he saw them. 3 boys near the corner table, shoulders pressed close together, bowls of soup clutched in small hands. They noticed him almost instantly. The eldest stiffened, his jaw tightening as though preparing for a fight. The middle one narrowed his eyes, suspicious. The youngest only stared, spoon frozen halfway to his lips. Adrian's chest constricted. He stepped closer, careful, as though approaching fragile glass. "I saw you on the scaffolding," he said softly. "You shouldn't have been up there in the cold." The eldest stood, thin shoulders squared. "We work. No one else will take us." "You shouldn't have to work like that," Adrian said, his voice breaking. "Not in a storm. Not ever." The boy's chin lifted in defiance. "Who are you to tell us what we should do?" Adrian hesitated, then reached into his coat. He pulled out the compass and set it on the table between them. "Someone who's been lost too long. Someone who should have been here before." The boys stared at it, the cracked glass glinting under the flickering light. Then the youngest reached into his pocket and pulled out a smaller compass, worn smooth, its scratch marks a perfect twin to the one Adrian held. Adrian's breath caught. His hand trembled as he whispered, "Where did you get that?" The smallest boy's eyes filled, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Mom said it was from you." The shelter's noise seemed to fade, leaving only the sound of Adrian's own heartbeat. He stared at the tiny compass in the boy's trembling hand, its scratched surface catching the weak light. His compass. The one he had given Hannah years ago on a snowy night when they were young, promising she'd never lose her way. Adrian lowered himself slowly to their level, his knees stiff against the wooden floor. His eyes locked on the eldest, who stood like a shield in front of the others. "Your mother, Hannah," Adrian said softly. "She was everything to me once. I didn't know she—" His voice broke, and he started again. "I didn't know she had you." The eldest narrowed his eyes, suspicion burning. "You're saying you knew her? Then where were you when she got sick? Where were you when she died?" The words cut deep. Adrian swallowed hard, unable to answer with anything that could erase the years. "I wasn't there, and I will regret it for the rest of my life, but I'm here now." The middle boy crossed his arms. "Everyone says that. People promise, then they leave. Mom said not to believe them." Adrian's throat tightened. He placed his compass gently on the table beside theirs, the two cracks lining up like mirror scars. "I can't change the past. I can only show you the truth now, that I am your father." The eldest's voice rose above the hum of the shelter. "Prove it." Adrian reached into his coat, pulling out the DNA results, his hands shaking as he slid the paper across. The eldest scanned the lines, lips moving, but he was too young to decipher the medical jargon. He thrust it back, defiant. "These are just words." For a moment, silence pressed heavy between them. Then the youngest lifted both compasses and pressed them together, the scratches forming a perfect seam. He looked up at Adrian with wide, wet eyes. "Mom said if the pieces ever matched, we'd know. She said it meant we weren't lost anymore." Adrian's vision blurred. He reached out, but stopped short, letting the boy keep the compasses in his small hands. "You'll never be lost again," he whispered. "Not while I'm alive." But the eldest stepped back, jaw trembling. "Words don't keep us warm. Promises don't feed us. Why should we trust you now?" Adrian's voice faltered, then steadied with all the weight of his father's compass in his chest. "Because this time, I won't leave. Even if you never forgive me, I will stay." The storm outside howled, rattling the windows, as if testing whether his vow could stand against the cold. The shelter's overhead lights flickered, casting long shadows across the crowded hall. Adrian remained crouched at the boys' table, the compass still glowing faintly between their hands. The eldest boy crossed his arms, refusing to soften. The middle one stared down at the soup he hadn't touched, his silence sharp with doubt. But the youngest, the one clutching both compasses, leaned just slightly toward Adrian, as if hope itself was tugging him closer. "Look," Adrian said quietly, his voice steady but heavy with pleading. "I know you've been hurt. I know people have made promises and broken them, but I'm not walking away, not this time." The eldest boy's eyes burned. "That's what Mom said you did. You left. You never came back." The words stabbed deep. Adrian's throat tightened. "She was right. I failed her. I failed you. But I didn't know you were here. If I had—" His voice broke, and he let the silence speak for him. The middle boy finally lifted his eyes. "Why should we believe you're any different? You're just another man in a suit." Adrian pulled the compass closer, holding it out to them. "Because I gave this to your mother, and she kept it safe for you. She wanted you to find me, even if she couldn't." His gaze swept across their faces. "She believed I would come back one day, and she was right." The youngest's lips trembled. He whispered a single word, fragile as the storm outside. "Dad?" Adrian's heart lurched. He reached out, but the eldest yanked his brother's back. "Don't call him that," he snapped. His voice cracked under the weight of grief and fear. "We don't need him. We only have each other." Adrian's eyes stung, but he didn't push further. He straightened, towering above the table, his breath unsteady. "I understand, but I'm not going anywhere. You'll see me again. And when you're ready, I'll be waiting." He left the shelter quietly, the boys' faces carved into his chest. Outside, snow hammered the city, blinding and merciless. Adrian stood in it, coat open, letting the storm lash against him. For years he had believed himself untouchable, a man above the cold. But tonight he knew the truth. He was no different than those boys, lost, waiting for someone to keep a promise. Behind him, through the frosted glass, the youngest boy still held both compasses in his hands. His lips moved again, shaping the word silently, as if afraid to let it go. Dad. By dawn, the tabloids had already pounced. Headlines screamed across digital screens, "Billionaire's secret sons discovered in blizzard." Photographs of Adrian entering the shelter were plastered everywhere, his figure looming in a storm of snow. Reporters speculated wildly. Illegitimate children, hidden scandals, empire in crisis. Adrian sat in the back of his sedan, phone buzzing non-stop. Jenna's voice came through on speaker, tight with urgency. "Investors are panicking. The board wants answers immediately. If you don't respond, they'll assume the worst." "The worst?" Adrian muttered. He stared out the window as the city crawled past, pale in the afterstorm. "The worst already happened. I let those boys grow up without me." "Adrian!" Jenna tried again, but he cut her off. "No more statements, no spin. I'm going to face this head on." He arrived at the tower to a wall of cameras and microphones. Security tried to usher him inside, but Adrian raised a hand. He stepped onto the icy steps, coat collar open, his face bare to the flash of bulbs. "Yes," he said firmly, his voice carrying over the crowd. "The children are mine. They are my sons. And if that makes me weaker in your eyes, so be it." The questions erupted. Who's the mother? How old are they? Why were they in a shelter? Adrian didn't flinch. "Their mother was Hannah Pierce. She passed away 6 months ago. She raised them alone when I should have been there. I failed her, and I failed them. But that ends today." The crowd gasped, their frenzy shifting from scandal to story. Cameras zoomed closer. Adrian lifted the compass in his hand, holding it up so the cracked face gleamed against the morning light. "My father carried this compass through every storm. He taught me that family is the only direction that matters. I lost mine once. I will not lose it again." Inside, his phone buzzed with frantic calls. Investors selling stock, rivals circling like vultures. But Adrian's chest felt lighter than it had in years. For the first time, he had spoken truth without fear. When he stepped into the lobby, Jenna met him with wide eyes. "You've ignited a firestorm," she whispered. Adrian closed the compass in his fist. "Then let it burn, because what rises from it will be stronger than anything I've built before." The fallout came fast. By nightfall, financial networks ran non-stop coverage. Coal investments in crisis. Stock prices slid. Rivals whispered about hostile takeovers, and shareholders demanded explanations. Adrian sat at the long boardroom table, the storm outside replaced by a storm of voices within. "This scandal undermines confidence," one director barked. "We can't afford sentiment right now." Another leaned forward, sharp-eyed. "You need to disassociate yourself, distance the company from them." Adrian's jaw tightened. Them. His sons. He rose slowly, letting silence spread. "You think this is scandal? You think children abandoned in a snowstorm are an embarrassment?" His voice cracked like thunder. "The only scandal is pretending money matters more than their lives." The room fell still. Adrian placed the frost-cracked compass on the table, its face gleaming under the lights. "This compass belonged to my father. He taught me that family is the only deal you never walk away from. I failed once. I will not fail again." Whispers circled, some fearful, others thoughtful. Adrian straightened. "If investors want to leave, let them. If rivals want to circle, let them. But this company will not be built on neglect. From this day forward, Coal Investments will fund a foundation to protect homeless children during winter. $50 million effective immediately." Gasps filled the room. "50 million?" one director sputtered. Yes, Adrian said firmly, because last week, 3 boys were working my windows in a storm. 3 boys who are mine, and I won't watch another child freeze while I build towers of glass. The board had no reply. Some looked away in shame. Others scribbled notes, calculating new equations of risk and reputation. Adrian gathered the compass, slipped it back into his pocket, and walked out. The foundation papers were already waiting on his desk. His pen didn't hesitate. Outside, the city was still buried in snow, but for the first time in years, Adrian felt he was no longer lost in it. Christmas morning arrived with the quiet light spilling over the skyline. Snow still clung to the rooftops, but the storm had passed. Inside Adrian's penthouse, warmth radiated from a crackling fire. For the first time in his life, the space wasn't silent. Laughter echoed off the glass walls. Small footsteps pattered across polished floors, and the smell of cocoa and pine filled the air. The boys sat on the rug near the tree, their eyes wide at the sight of wrapped boxes stacked neatly beneath the branches. But Adrian wasn't thinking of wealth or spectacle. He knelt before them with 3 small velvet cases in his hands. "Gifts don't make a family," he said softly, "but symbols remind us of who we are." He opened the first case, revealing a restored silver compass. The crack was polished smooth, the glass replaced, and a new engraving shimmered on the back. Ethan Cole. He placed it in the eldest boy's hand. "This one is yours," Adrian said, "so you'll always know your way." He opened the second case for the middle child. Daniel Cole. The boy's lips trembled as his small fingers traced the letters. Finally, he turned to the youngest, who had clutched the original compass since the shelter. Adrian gently took it back, kissed the scarred metal, and set the restored third compass in the boy's palm. Michael Cole. "You'll never be lost again," Adrian whispered, his voice thick. The boys stared at their names, etched in permanence. The eldest's defenses wavered, his chin quivering despite the stubborn set of his jaw. Then, almost inaudible, he breathed, "Dad." Adrian's vision blurred. He pulled all 3 of them into his arms, holding them against his chest as the fire crackled. Years of silence, regret, and absence melted in that moment, replaced by warmth stronger than any storm. For the first time in his life, Christmas didn't feel hollow. It felt like home. Months later, the city had thawed. Snowmelt trickled along curbs, tulips pushed through park soil, and New York roared with spring. Adrian Cole walked through the revolving doors of his tower, not as the untouchable billionaire the world once knew, but as a man who carried more than contracts and numbers. Upstairs, his boardroom buzzed with analysts, charts, and projections. Yet, when Adrian entered, silence fell. He carried no briefcase, only a slim folder in one hand and the frost-cracked compass in the other. His son's laughter echoed faintly in his mind from that morning, when they had raced across the penthouse kitchen spilling cocoa on the marble counters. He set the compass on the table. "Gentlemen," he said evenly, "profits matter, but legacy matters more. Our foundation has already sheltered over 1,000 children this winter. That is not weakness, that is strength." No one argued. Some nodded, grudging but convinced. After the meeting, Adrian stepped onto the balcony. The wind was warmer now, carrying the hum of a city in bloom. Jenna joined him quietly. "The boys are waiting downstairs," she said with a smile. "Something about ice cream before homework." Adrian chuckled, a sound once foreign to him. He tucked the compass into his pocket. "And let's not keep them waiting." Minutes later, 3 boys bounded into his arms on the plaza steps. Cameras flashed from across the street. But Adrian no longer cared. He bent low, hugging them tight, his heart fuller than any balance sheet. The man who once ruled the skyline with cold ambition now ruled nothing but this moment. A father walking into the future, guided not by numbers, but by 3 small voices calling him Dad.